So I'm really excited to introduce our panel this morning. I know that many of you are here today specifically to hear from them and also to network with everyone else. So thank you for joining me in the board in introducing our distinguished panel. So we've got Dr. Siria Martinez, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Student Equity and Success. Good morning, Dr. Martinez. Thank you for being here. We've got Dr. Latonya Williams, Visiting Dean, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Leadership Development. Good morning, Dr. Williams. We're happy to have you here today. And then Dr. Abdimalik Buul, Visiting Executive of Educational Excellence. So good morning, Dr. Buul. Thank you for being here. And all of their individual and collective work are geared toward eliminating student and employee racial inequity gaps, building and sustaining anti-racist teaching practices, and collaborating with various professionals to carry this heavy lift of work. So they'll be providing an update on the Chancellor's Office vision for professional development in 2022 and how PD practitioners can use professional development to support equity efforts on their campus. So I will turn it over to our panel and thank you all for being here this morning.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I'm so glad that I joined you all when you were sharing your survey because I'm so excited. I know Dr. Williams, I won't steal her thunder. She will be talking about that and what we've done with assessment. And some of it is truly in alignment with some of the preliminary data that we received. So I'm excited to be here and to have further conversation around that. But I do want to start off by thanking Shannon, Dr. Wright, and the planning committee for their hard work and for providing space for my colleagues, Dr. Williams, Dr. Bull, and I to be a part of your conference this morning. I also want to thank all of you for adopting a theme that encompasses a message that we all need to hear right now, which is embracing change, creating equitable opportunities, and sharing those best practices. I do recognize, again, I think you guys mentioned earlier, that we are convening during a very difficult time, still a moment in time where we're still navigating that worldwide pandemic, the new variants that keep popping up, the deep mental and physical exhaustion. I think I heard that loud and clear. Yes, we're all tired. And for many of us, we've experienced loss, right, within these last couple of years as well. But it was very important for my colleagues and I to be able to join you today. And I am here because I do believe that we have the great responsibility to our students, to our communities, and of course, to our state. And now more than ever, I do find this time to be a sacred time to be able to spend this with you here. And I also want to say thank you, remind you that we're in this work together. So I'm excited about what's to come and how we're going to partner in the future. Next slide, please. So this is what our time together looks like this morning. I will start out by framing the conversation and providing some context on how as a system we have moved our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility agenda along and how we plan to institutionalize and also integrate the DEI into our everyday work. Dr. Williams will cover, of course, a new vision for professional development, which I know you guys are so eager to hear about. And she will also share with you some of the resources that you can leverage already as classified professionals and professionals as a whole. And then Dr. Bull will share with you the important work that it is to have your voice and represented as part of the EO process on your campus. And he'll also help us reimagine a world where our students are reflected and affirmed in our institutions. And then we'll conclude with some Q&A. Hopefully there's some time for that. And we really do want to engage with you in a meaningful dialogue. So hopefully if you put questions in the chat, we'll try to answer. But if not, we hope to have some time really to unmute and engage here in a meaningful way as well. So next slide, please. So let me just take a step back and introduce myself formally, because I know for many of you, maybe it's my first time in front of you here. So I'm Dr. Siria Martinez, and I have the honor of serving as Acting Vice Chancellor of Student Equity and Success for California's Community College Chancellor's Office. But I do join you this morning with a learner's humility. I do have a deep appreciation for your work, and I'm always open to learning from you because as educators, I think that we never stop learning, right? And I do believe that we must keep our hearts and our minds open to the impossible. I also join you as an unapologetic student-centered leader. That's why I wake up every day and do the work that I do. And despite extreme loss during this past year and the multiple crises, I think in the last 2 years alone, I still believe that our students can succeed and that we can create a campus culture that is inclusive if we work together to do that. And then lastly, I join you as a first-generation woman of color in higher education and leadership. The intersectionality of what it means for me to lead as a woman includes my identity as a Latina, as a first-generation student, and I'd like to share that who beat the odds and survived growing up in Compton, but I do carry each identity as a badge of honor. So your conference and the topics I think that you guys have selected are timely and necessary. And I don't have to tell you, of course, that our students are hurting right now, because I think you guys get to see that at the local level right now as you engage with them every day. And that classified professionals like yourself and faculty and administrators, yes, we're all tired, so I hear you. But what you're doing through this conference, I think it's an act of love for your students, and you being here, I see it as an act of leadership. And then I know it will be hard to stay focused for the next couple of days. I think you guys have a 2-day conference, but I hope you'll see it as a gift to yourselves and again to your students. And my hope is that this conference will re-energize you in order to go back and work with our students and to be present with each other. Because again, I think we're all going through difficult times and we have to be there for each other. So next slide, please. So for those reasons, this morning, I want to focus on how do we nurture an anti-racist campus culture during constant change, right? We're experiencing that constant change, and as a collective group of educators in a time of crisis. I also want to center the conversation about equity in the how. How do we undertake the work of dismantling structural racism within our system and cultivating the conditions for just and equitable outcomes in achievement for our students? Equity, you can see it both as a theoretical framework and a practice that enables and empowers to redefine a problem and guide our professional and institutional decision-making. It is as a moral framework aligned with practice. Equity-minded administrative practices will accelerate progress towards equitable educational outcomes. And then by linking mindsets to our daily habits, our routines, and our everyday decision-making, allowing us to unlearn, and I do mean unlearn and relearn ways of knowing and translating our responsibilities through that social justice lens. And operationalizing equity in our workplace will require us to do 2 things. First is to really become race conscious. I know a lot of times this can be very uncomfortable for folks, but we do have to acknowledge the historical and contemporary significance of race and the degree to which structural racism exists and is deeply entrenched features of our institutions, our systems, and our structures. So don't be afraid. I always say, don't be afraid to disaggregate your data by race so that you can identify the disproportionate impacted groups and really address the true needs that they need, that need to be met. And then also, equity will require us to be institutionally focused. And this is recognizing that it is the institution's responsibility to disrupt and dismantle systems and structures that have produced the unequal outcomes, and not the individual students or the communities who have already experienced that discrimination or marginalization. Next slide, please. And now I share this slide as a visual just to show you the roadmap as to how this work is being integrated. But for the purpose of this presentation, of course, we will continue to focus on professional development and the resources that are available for classified professionals and all professionals in general, and how we're envisioning the future partnerships to better serve all of you. And then this is the plan that has been shared with the field for external DEIA integration. Hopefully you've seen this before, but if not, I would like to share it with you. Our DEIA integration plan called us to establish 2 things: leadership and engagement. We are looking for commitment from a group of leaders that set clear expectations and a culture of engagement, and that offers opportunity for growth and transformation. So once we can do that, we do believe that we can develop the policies that will enable and codify the work. And yes, this means changing resource allocation processes and policies. And as Dr. Gonzalez, I don't know if you guys have heard her say this before, she always reminds us that budgets are statements of our values. So how we invest our money tells us exactly what we value. And the work then has to be organized. We do have to seek to secure stakeholder collaboration and coordination. We have to build our local and our legislative support, provide communication and guidance, and then provide professional development that cultivates cultural change, because as we know, this work is not an add-on. We must promote model practices, or as you refer to it in your title as well, in your conference, is to share those best practices, right, with each other, and then advance that evaluation and continuous improvement. And we'll get back to that one because I think that one is very important about the continuous improvement and the evaluation processes for our PD. And then on this graphic in yellow text, we identify where we think the Chancellor's office is as a system, certainly central to this work, and our colleges look to us for guidance. So we are consistently trying to provide that guidance to our colleges. Next slide, please. So to amplify this work as an agency, we had to start out with unpacking what it would take to create a culture that helps us achieve our goals. And to do this, It means understanding who we serve and how we serve them. What we know, and I think most of us know, is that California community colleges, 73% of our students identify as students of color. Students are the most diverse population of California community college campuses. And the race and ethnic diversity of our student population continues to be the more diverse, even from faculty and staff. So in 2019, our Board of Governors and our system office introduced 68 recommendations to institutionalize and integrate DEIA as a centralized component of our cultural transformation. This work would mean that we need to embark on a journey that takes us from compliance to empowerment. And throughout our presentation, you will continue to hear us say, going from compliance to empowerment, because truly we want to empower everyone that works in our system. The empowerment of our communities, our agency staff, our campus classified professionals and faculty, and students to be seen, to be heard, and really inviting all of you to be a part of the solution. So for our system, DEIA is about moving from awareness raising to building the capacity to do this work, which is why we're here today, providing the opportunities for skills enhancement, leadership development, creating intentional professional development and required training, and then also developing those centralized tools that we need to support our everyday work. So a lot of that we're developing right now, you will see within the Vision Resource Center. That's where we're housing most of our work. And this is a cycle to empower integration within our system, and that ultimately will transform our own organization and campus culture. So next slide, please. So the question and challenge that our colleges face is, how do we achieve, again, transformational change that institutionalizes and integrates DEIA at its core? So ensuring learning means equity imbued into the instructional environment, our instructional teams, instructional content, and instructional data. We also have to relentlessly focus on student outcomes and student experiences by examining our classrooms, our campus climate, and the basic needs to ensure a holistic student approach. Now, as we discuss universal design, it means that as institutions integrate DEIA in outcomes, it requires us to implement an equity framework that makes this work the responsibility of every person that works for the institution. This work is not the job of a single person or division. And as leaders, we must develop those teams, right, that understand the equity framework and language very intimately in order to achieve the outcomes that we desire. And in order to be intentional and proactive in addressing faculty and classified professional diversity, our colleges and districts must shift from the practice, again, of compliance to empowering partnerships across organizational systems, our departments, and our divisions. And we have to design, implement, and reinforce policies, procedures, and even our individual behaviors that serve to cultivate what we want to call an inclusive ecosystem that's going to be focused on equity and mutual respect in order to recruit, right, and retain and support the diverse workforce that is going to be responsive to the needs of our diverse student population. Again, as a system, we have to understand that we all have a role to play in order to move from that compliance to empowerment and institute equitable hiring practices. You will soon see updated EO handbooks and modules to help our colleges address these equitable hiring and retention practices. But again, I won't steal Dr. Bull's thunder. I think he'll go more into that work, the work that he's leading with EEO. And lastly, I mentioned earlier that budgets are a statement of our values, and by streamlining our reporting practices, this will allow us to examine how the money is being invested. So what you'll see coming from the Chancellor's office, it's a move towards a more streamlined reporting model so that our colleges have the flexibility to braid funds and support the initiatives that will help us achieve the vision for success. Next slide, please. So again, as I urge you, as you're thinking about, how do we build these anti-racist institutions where students can thrive and where all of us can thrive, I urge you to listen and prioritize the student voice and experiences. And this is coming from the Vision for Success commitment number 2, which asks us to design with the students in mind, especially as faculty, as they're working on creating culturally relevant curriculum that students can relate to. And then secondly, to foster a campus-wide culture of inquiry. This is Vision for Success commitment number 4, which asks us to foster the use of data and evidence to make that data-informed investments and decisions. And then thirdly, we ask that you integrate equity and anti-racism into your vision, your mission, and your local goals. And this is commitment number 2, designing again with the students in mind. With over 73% of our students of color, we need to address equity and adopt and embrace those policies that are going to be anti-racist. And then lastly, intentionally requiring individual responsibility, again, from every stakeholder on your campus. This is commitment number 5, because we are owning the student performance. You do this as a community and hire employees that reflect your students. And you also provide professional development support that helps faculty, classified professionals, and administrators grow and become those equity champions that we want to see at the local level as well. Next slide, please. So as you operationalize equity and design with equity in mind, you have to remember again that this work calls upon each of us to deeply think about the power asymmetries within institutional hierarchies, because each of us experience and exercise some measure of power and privilege in our respective positions. We may not think so, but we do. And we'll be expected to interrogate the status quo, examine those old assumptions, test those new approaches to solving persistent gaps and opportunities and achievement, and really be afraid of iteration. So we want you to try things again. If something is not working, do not be afraid to try something new. This work is going to require, again, a complete mind shift. For many years, I think, a lot of colleges think about accreditation. It's like, okay, let's just check the box. Let's make sure we're doing all of those things. I've been a part of the accreditation process, so I've seen that as well. But accreditation is not a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. The collective knowledge, responsibilities, and commitment from colleges, districts, associations, the state, accreditation institutions, it's really just an ecosystem that calls us first to be committed to do the hard work every day and keep showing up, which I think all of us are doing that, even when we try it and it doesn't work, but you really go back again to reiterating and improving your processes, policies, and procedures. And then it also calls us to be courageous, right? We want you to have the courage of initiative and action, again, making those first attempts, pursuing and pioneering efforts, and simply just stepping up to the plate. And then showing courage in the way you use your voice. A lot of times we need to have and raise those difficult issues, providing tough feedback and sharing popular opinions in many cases as we're trying to do this work of equity. And then also it calls us to be curious, right? And reimagine new ways of doing things on your campus. Reimagine even how student needs are being met and find ways to doing so, especially again, during these tough times that everybody is going through. And then seek cultural intelligence. I think it will be important to have cultural agility and understand not just our students, but also our faculty and classified professionals that come from different backgrounds and are working with us on our campus. And then lastly, it'll urge us to be a collaborative, right? So true progress will be made, I think, when we can collaborate and reach across divisions to better serve our students and each other. So I know a lot of times we focus just on our students, but I think it's also important to focus on the work that we're doing. We're all people, and we're all experiencing different things on our campus, and we want to be inclusive of everyone, not just our students, but also those of us who work at the local level. So I just want to, my hope is that the commitment from every single person that works for the California Community College system will value and commit to dismantling anti-racist practices so that we can all have an inclusive environment where all of us can succeed. So again, I just want to thank you for your time and commitment to doing the work at the local level. And I'm here and available and really, truly ready to support your efforts moving forward. So I want to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Williams, who will talk a little bit more about a vision for professional development.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. I want to thank you. My name is Latonya Williams, and I'm a visiting dean of institutional effectiveness at the Chancellor's office. I really want to bring you greetings from Cosumnes River College, which is the campus which I served prior to my appointment at the Chancellor's office. I also want to bring you a great deal of gratitude for inviting us to this space to join you into really thinking through how becoming anti-racist practitioners requires different knowledge, skills, and abilities based on our respective positionalities within our institutions. Even as we move from one position of leadership to another, and the context and the conditions for which we work change, it becomes incumbent upon us to continue to sharpen and stretch and become increasingly flexible in how we leverage our influence. And as Dr. Martinez mentioned, our situational power and influence to build teams to advance anti-racist ideas, actions, and change at the local level. We believe ongoing professional learning is not the only lever, but it is certainly a key lever in accelerating change to create those type of institutions our students are entitled to. And we hope that collectively, in partnership with each of you, that we can work together to build a more unified system to cultivate these institutions, teaching and learning environments that will support the work that we're trying to accomplish. Now, more than ever, the colleges have been called upon. And I know before I came to the Chancellor's office, to do more, learn and lead through tremendous adversity and ongoing uncertainty and certainly anxiety about the change to come and the capacity to meet the challenge of the future. But the road to recovery and building a more resilient system will in part be a result of the vision that we set, the decisions that we make, and the work that we do to double down on student-focused policies and at cultivating equity-oriented and anti-racist teaching and learning ecosystems. In this virtual space, we are fortunate, of course, to be led on the part of this journey towards those goals and in partnership with professional organizations like 4CSD. So I want to echo Dr. Martinez's sentiment about our great excitement about working more closely with your organization. So what does a new vision for professional development look like? And maybe shouldn't say new, a renewed vision of professional development look like for institutional effectiveness. One which centers equity as a core professional competency, meaning that we design with equity in mind and it's firmly embedded in all of the work that we do, the strategic investments that we make, and certainly hold ourselves accountable through evaluations which serve to determine the extent to which we align our values with our actions and to what degree that results in better outcomes for our students. We also are deeply committed to inspiring and motivating systemic change through anti-racist thinking, innovation, and leadership. And I can share with you two of the mechanisms that we're utilizing to leverage that in institutional effectiveness. And certainly we strive to achieve these goals really through thinking about alignment in all the work that we do with our equity goals and commitments and priorities and the vision for success and all the other statewide initiatives that serve to support and accelerate the type of change we're aspiring to. And finally, I'll also mention, as I mentioned earlier, measuring impact in all the work we do, but really thinking about how do we design strategic communication and coordination with the field to ensure continuous feedback in terms of how the work should be done and how effective strategic investments are at the local level. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the strategic investments that we've made in the last academic year is in communities of practice. I'm sure you are familiar, all of you are familiar with this model by which we try to develop representing a systems-focused approach to designing and delivering equity-oriented, learner-centered, and contextually relevant professional development experiences for employees in the field. These COPs were developed in partnership with other Chancellor's Office divisions to avoid duplication, also while leveraging our internal and external expertise and experience in accelerating change. The areas of focus are informed by the core commitments and system-wide organized program goals and outcomes delineated in the vision for success. They include diversity, equity, inclusion in teaching and learning, online learning, equitable placement with fidelity, dual enrollment, credit for prior learning, strategic enrollment management, financial aid, and basic needs. And we've undertaken this deep work to support the field in expanding these Chancellor's Office and local priorities in consultation and coordination with campus leaders, subject matter experts, and capacity builders with proven results of student success and institutional effectiveness. And here I'll say, I want to make sure we take a time to recognize the work that's being done all across the state with those capacity building partners, from Los Angeles Community College District, the Palomar College, the Puente Project, the Career Ladders Project, American College of University Educators, a wide variety of subject matter experts that represent the intellect, capacity to lead change that is systems focused, but is locally relevant and provides campuses with the capacity building support they need to undertake this work. Next slide, please. So this work, as you know, requires taking risk and sharing bold ideas about the future of teaching and learning and building community and coalition building and taking individual and collective action to create the conditions for our students to achieve their academic goals is really the primary focus of these communities of practice. And the work is really grounded in fostering deeper awareness of system-wide goals and change, strengthening these equity-minded behaviors and DEI practices grounded in every individual's taking ownership, as Dr. Martinez mentioned earlier, of equitable student outcomes. We are working to create accountability structures through measurement and evaluation of the work that we're doing to ensure that there's alignment and that the results and processes are aligned with our vision. And providing opportunities, as we mentioned, for shared learning, because we believe that the expertise in the field with high support will be able to accelerate the type of change that we are called upon to support. And then certainly development of actionable practices to effectuate that change within the learner's respective areas of influence. Doing work with professional development requires that we really situate the work around the individual duties and responsibilities of different employees and provide contextually relevant professional development. Oftentimes, we will find that we focus on the what in terms of what we want to achieve and don't necessarily focus as much on the how. What steps do we take? What changes do we make? And how do we accomplish that within the existing compliance-based framework that many of us are obligated to, and to move towards a more empowerment framework whereby we can accomplish the work that we need to through a shift in mindsets and behavior. And then lastly, I want to also focus on ensuring that the information, the resources that are developed through communities of practice are widely available to the field for those that organizations, individuals were not able to participate. I mean, certainly these are small working groups, but we want to make sure that access to the resources are available system-wide, and we undertake that through the Vision Resource Center. Next slide, please. So as many of you know, or may know, we have sought to, in coordination with the faculty associations and classified professional associations, and with our evaluation partners at Insight Center at Sacramento State University, we have developed a survey, in this case with classified professionals, to develop an understanding, determine the extent to which they had an appreciation and understanding and/or awareness of equity as a mindset and a practice, and to the degree to which their respective campus environments have sought to create equity-minded institutional change, and also the degree to which, much like your survey, they were able to participate in those professional development offerings, and whether they were relevant to their particular roles and responsibilities. We also solicited, as your survey did as well, feedback on barriers to access, desired frequency of learning opportunities, in which times work ideally for virtual professional learning experiences. And one of the things that we've come to recognize is the inherent importance of dismantling barriers to accessing those opportunities so that classified professionals, independent of maybe their local campus context, can access opportunities for professional learning through the Vision Resource Center at their discretion. So that's one of the major initiatives of the work with respect to supporting classified professionals and part-time faculty. All the resources that are going to be available or produced as a consequence of these professional development surveys will be made available through the Vision Resource Center. Now, what we found, and we only have the preliminary results, the surveys were launched in fall 2021. The findings are still forthcoming, and certainly we plan to share that widely with the field through the Vision Resource Center, and we will certainly share that with your professional organization as well. There are approximately 28,000 classified professionals in the system, and we surveyed over 3,200. So we wanted to make sure that we had a response rate of over 10%. So we've met that goal. So we're really excited to learn through the findings and recommendations by our partner evaluation team about the needs of professional development with respect to professional development for classified professionals. Last month, the Chancellor's Office also launched in partnership with the Academic Senate and the Faculty Association for California Community College, the Part-Time Faculty Needs Assessment Survey. Much like the impetus for the classified survey, the agency hopes to develop a more inclusive professional development plan to inform the design and implementation of DEIA professional learning intended to support part-time faculty. So we're excited about the opportunities that lie in front of us to develop professional development that's contextually relevant to the field, and that might also include very differentiated learning experiences based on the feedback that we receive in those professional development surveys. Next slide, please. And here we, in an effort to make foundational DEI-aligned professional development available to the field, meaning that anyone can access them at their discretion, really thinking about how do we dismantle and to be intentional about strategically dismantling barriers to foundational knowledge that is applicable to all employee classes. We have begun to develop DEI-aligned learning modules that are available in the Vision Resource Center. And here is an important opportunity for me to just acknowledge, and I know you'll be learning from the Vision Resource Center later on today, the work that we have done to integrate institutional effectiveness through the Vision Resource Center to make sure that we are intentional and strategic about making professional development modules that are responsive to the field, contextually relevant and available, and that we develop a communication strategy to make sure that we can communicate with different employee classes. So the learning communities are going to be even more important because they will be a principal vehicle for us to communicate directly with classified professionals who are aligned in their respective roles, also part-time faculty, and even by discipline. So that's forthcoming in the near future. And we're really excited to have the opportunity to communicate directly with different employee classes based on their positionality. Next slide, please. Okay, so what have we accomplished thus far in our goal to measure impact of activities? So here in the new vision, or the renewed vision for professional development, we've begun to make these connections between institutional effective activities and desired impact with respect to achieving our equity goals system-wide. To that end, we sought to role model high expectations with high support with regard to institutional effectiveness by highlighting and reaffirming the use of data, inquiry, and evidence to cultivate system-wide change through our professional learning infrastructure. To that end, we've designed an evaluation rubric. These are all new local innovations and institutional effectiveness, designing an evaluation framework informed by the Vision for Success to assess solicited and unsolicited professional development proposals from the field to ensure alignment, feasibility, and impact. Through our partnership with Ed Insight Center at Sac State, we co-designed an evaluation framework for all of our communities of practice to ensure PD providers produce relevant deliverables based on retorted goals and alignment with Chancellor's Office priority. This expectation has or will be reflected in all of our vendor agreements in the future. We've also developed periodic reporting on alignment and effectiveness, measuring the extent to which our program goals and objectives have been met, documenting areas of progress or achievement, and identifying opportunities for continuous improvement of the curriculum that is developed through our communities of practice and made broadly available to the field. Now, we are excited to learn in the forthcoming months, usually receive our report from our external evaluation team in June or July around the degree to which we have exceeded our legislative intent and aligned our strategic investments with the Vision for Success and other Chancellor's Office priorities. So I want to thank you, and I can certainly solicit questions and feedback after Dr. Buul's presentation. But we're really excited to continue to do this work in collaboration and coordination with the organization. And we would welcome any feedback into how we can work more constructively together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you, Dr. Martinez. And I would be remiss if I didn't start off Women's History Month by just taking a moment to soak in that I'm blessed to work with two phenomenal women of color in this space. As we continue to move toward this work, it's very, very important for us to still always contextualize, as was stated earlier, what are we trying to eradicate? And that is ultimately making these institutions anti-racist and essentially really pro our students of color. And if we kind of break down what does that mean? If we look at our professional development options and the way we're trying to integrate our work, there's 4 levels or 4 phases to this. The personal. A lot of our trainings really focus on the personal, interpersonal, dealing with microaggressions, implicit bias. We're trying to, from our angle and perspective, look at structural and institutional impact. So you're honestly charged with really looking at 3 different levels here: the personal, interpersonal, institutional impact of your work. And we're trying to look at ways to systematize and integrate this from a structural support perspective as the Chancellor's Office. If you go to the next slide, more implicitly said, some personal biases that folks may be dealing with. And as you know, a lot of you are administrators, classified professionals, faculty on the front lines. Certain people in your institutions may have some implicit biases. They may think that Black and brown students are not motivated to learn, for example. And so you see a lot of interpersonal interactions that are manifesting at our institutions that may look like are discouraging students from asking questions, our syllabi, right? There's quite a few trainings and making these classrooms very, very culturally relevant and competent for our students to be reflected and affirmed, validated. You see some dismissive interactions in various offices with student services, admissions records, counseling, just a lack of, or not just engagement, but actually dismissal. And then you look at the institutional practices. I heard a little bit when I was logging on about just, the budget values. And so we're trying to, from a structural perspective, look at things, support, and accountability. And we're going to talk about that in a bit here. But as we look at this work, how, as Dr. Martinez mentioned, is it integrated? And it's not baked in, but really not sprinkled on, but baked in throughout your institution. Go to the next slide, please. So how does it impact students? Why is my work that I'm kind of charged with now, connecting EO to the classroom or to our institutions, how does it impact students? Well, we know the research is very, very clear. I'm speaking to the choir here for the most part. The more diverse the faculty, the more diverse the classified professional, the greater diversity of content, the greater diversity of readings, curricular, teaching methods, scholarly ideas presented to students. This actually enhances the educational experience, not just for students of color, but all students. We know that cooperative learning and different type of engagement models has demonstrated value in enhancing the academic achievement of students from all racial and ethnic backgrounds. And it also reduces prejudice and biases. So I know that there's institutions that look different. There's rural, there's urban, there's suburban. There's Northern California, there's Southern California, there's Central California, there's institutions that are multi-district, institutions that are, one college district. Your student populations look different. So if we're trying to make our students, ultimately, that's our why, be better citizens of society, prepared for the global workforce, then it is a dereliction of a duty on our part to not expose them to the enriching, diverse ideas. So how then do we adequately prepare our students? And that's how we want to kind of frame the argument of representation and symbolism. Now, it's actually why it does matter. Go to the next slide. So our vision here at the Chancellor's office is that we have historical funding. And this is important because we had $20 million that we received last year or throughout this calendar year. There's $10 million proposed in the new budget. We also have PD funding in the same amount of $20 million. So what are we trying to do? Our objective, our hope, our goal is to create and foster a space of innovation and also accountability. So with support, and we were hoping that we can create this innovative space where people think outside the traditional norms and boxes in the forms of these mini grants. We're also going to support the field with a revised best practice handbook. It hasn't been revised since 2015. And it's important because there's innovative strategies, best practices, promising practices that we're looking at to see how we can replicate this. And so that should be out next month, hopefully. We're also going to launch a series of professional development modules that are actually, the content's underway right now. And we'll talk about that in a bit in the next slide. And I want to go back to that aspect that diversity, again, does not benefit students of color. We're honing in on this point. It benefits all students. Next slide, please. So $15 million has reached your bank accounts because I have been flooded with emails asking what can we do with this money. ACRO, your human resources officers, please contact them. There are three different areas and elements that you can utilize this funding in. That's pre-hiring, hiring, and post-hiring strategies. In the hiring and post-hiring strategies are professional development options. So it's imperative that we want to go back to, again, Dr. Martinez mentioned, breaking these silos. We would love to see PD departments and staff and faculty administrators collaborating with their human resources folks and developing, and their EEO folks, and developing content around PD that mitigates a lot of the challenges that your institution is facing. So for example, you may have an institution that's phenomenal at recruitment, folks of color, but the retention efforts are not there. So what PD can we put around inclusion, belonging, that's imperative for you to retain your employees? Or maybe you have the phenomenal institution, but you're a best kept secret. So what efforts can you do in terms of recruitment? So it's imperative that we work collaboratively and amongst each other, utilize this funding. So yes, each district received about $208,000 2 weeks ago. And the mini grants are in the process. We're going to develop with the EEO DAC committee recommendations and guidance on how we're going to launch those. And that is going to be an opportunity, again, to look at and do an autopsy of your institution, see where are the areas that you can improve on, and then support and supplement that with data and say, hey, we're noticing that our hiring practices are not great. Let's do some things around that. We'll go to the next slide. These modules will be launched in the next month, and we're going to have an EEO certificate. And we are asking you, I'm explicitly asking you at this point, humble competition amongst yourselves as well, which institution can be certified, who can certify the most at their campuses. We have these pre-hiring, hiring, and post-hiring modules that are going to be launched in the Vision Resource Center. And we're hoping that you can utilize that space to also dialogue amongst yourselves of what strategies are being deployed at institutions similar to you that you can also implement at your local campuses. So again, we're trying to create a community of consciousness and care, curated around compassion and changing the metrics. Next slide, please. The EEO handbook, it went to 2 feedback sessions. We sent out an email blast to all the different statewide constituent groups. Over 30 districts are represented in this new EEO handbook about strategies they're deploying for mentorship, from recruitment to retention, to even their PD offerings. So you probably took some type of input you probably gave some type of input to folks that came and gave us their promising the best practices in moving the needles at their institutions. It's in draft mode right now with our internal communications department. It will be out shortly, and we're hopefully inviting you to the April system-wide webinar. And then we're hoping that we can launch that out. Again, these trainings are not in lieu of, but in support of the work that you're doing, right? We're here to supplement you and support you in the work that you're doing. Next slide, please. So things that we must consider. Okay, I want to connect again the vision for success with what we're trying to do. We are at a transformative moment to meet and lead the global demands of California with a DEI focus. Everything that we do, we want to pair high expectations. Expectations are high here. There's also high support, funding, modules, revised handbook, strategies, tips, solutions. So what does that mean? That means we need to interrogate antiquated ways of doing business. The phenomenal thing, in a crazy way, about your role is that it's one of the most fluid and dynamic roles at these campuses. You can literally have a PD coordinator who is a faculty member or an administrator or a classified professional, which means you're able to infiltrate a lot of different spaces. Take advantage of that. Let's create and design ways in which we can be thoughtful and innovative in moving the metrics with our PD work. Next slide, please. Also, we want to focus on the hard work, not just the hard work, centering students as our why, with resource-supported data-driven decisions. This is in alignment with points 1 and 2 of the Vision Resource Center. Always designing and deciding what's with the best student in mind. So some of the offerings that we have in our PD, we go back to our core. Our institutions are empty buildings without students. We'll be talking to the walls, right? So we have to focus and be intentional on why we are there, and then how do we move around the work and focus relentlessly on meeting those objectives. Next slide, please. So there's some just timelines they want to, keep you all aware of. April, next month, is going to be a very, very busy month. We're going to have a system-wide webinar that we're hoping to launch these EO certificated modules, as well as the best practices handbook, which should be available in its PDF digital format to the system for release. So look out for those. And then next slide, please. We'll send these resources, some articles based upon some of the research that we shared. We'll go to the next slide. Going back to why this work again is important at the hard work level, self-efficacy and self-esteem. This is a picture of Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain, from his basketball career, not his other stuff, his basketball career, was known to have the most dominant performance ever by scoring 100 points in a game. It's never been done before. He scored 100 points. And he was never able to score 100 points again. Never able to score 100 points again, because the night he scored 100 points, he shot 28 of 32 from the free throw line. He had an 87.5% free throw percentage. Typically, he would shoot 51%. So because he shot that percentage that night, he was booed, and he never shot that percentage ever again. He never shot that percentage ever again. So it's important that the self-esteem is the degree to which students feel satisfied with themselves and feel valuable and worthy of respect. Self-efficacy refers to individuals' beliefs in his or her capacity to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments. So self-efficacy reflects confidence in the ability to exert control over one's own motivation, behavior, and social environment. So think about this. The most dominant center ever to play was scored 100 points, never scored 100 points because he was booed. So think about the ways in which our students are booed in our institutions. When they walk into our spaces, are they reflected in the imagery? When we engage them, how we engage them, the methodology in which we engage them, how do we welcome them? Is it typical like DMV, status, or do we actually validate them? These are the types of things that we have to consider, the self-efficacy, self-esteem, because all of this impacts students as they matriculate through our spaces. So we have to assess and evaluate our professional development from matriculation to graduation. And classified professionals play the most instrumental role in that. You see students more than they need to have a professor in that classroom for 16 weeks. You see them when they register, when they apply for graduation, when they're getting their parking permit. There's various ways in which they engage constantly daily our institutions. So what can we develop and put together and curate to make sure that they are not booed consistently out of our system? Next slide, please. And a lot of them are dealing with imposter syndrome, and that is the feeling of belief that you've been given something you didn't earn, don't deserve. A lot of them are told, that they're in the 13th grade or the 14th grade when they come to our community college system, as if they didn't make it to the university. So this psychological pattern leads to self-doubt about your accomplishments and harboring a persistent internalized fear of being a fraud. And so we have to figure out a way through our PD work to not just validate them, to not give them a sense of belonging, but for them to understand that not only do they belong, but they make the fabric of that institution. A sense of belonging is like, oh, I feel welcome. That's like being part of the table, being invited to dinner. We have to ensure our students are making the ingredients at the table, that they're actually, choosing who gets to be on the reservation for dinner or not. That's another level of analysis, PD work that's very, very imperative that we have to look at. Next slide, please. The validation theory, I'm pretty sure some of you are well aware of this theory developed by Dr. Rendon. And she talked about, and it's been used quite a bit. The Printer Project uses this as one of their foundational core theories. But it talks about elements of enabling, confirming, supporting process initiated by in and out of class agents. So all of you here play a very, very critical role, a monumental role in recruitment, retention efforts for not just our students, but also our colleagues. So do not underestimate the power in which you do have. Next slide, please. So imagine where our students, a world where our students are reflecting and affirm that institutions. How would that look like? If you go to the next slide, you would see that we can talk about the Black genius that's around. We just came out of Black History Month. Imagine if they walked into our STEM spaces and they saw folks that contributed Black genius, such as Charles Drew and Dr. Jesse Ernest Wilkins Jr. or Philip McGaway. They saw the inventors and the contributions of technology that we use today in their technical education or CTE spaces, not just in the curriculum, but they saw the imagery, a wall of fame of folks that look like them, of faculty and professionals that look like them, that greeted them. If you go to the next slide, you will see Brown intelligence, our students and the people and the contributions of their ancestors in our spaces. And so then they start to feel a sense of not only do I belong, but my people have contributed to creating breaks, to going to outer space, to creating the incubator. And so the health and especially given the disparities that are going on, if folks understood what they can contribute, that they didn't come from nothing, that they're not on the margins, this would be completely different. So we have to, you can go to the next slide, understand how we have to begin to see in our PD work, what have you begun to see that you cannot unsee? What have you begun to unearth yourself when it comes to white supremacy and racism that you have to challenge consistently and constantly? And also, how have we been excluded? How have you participated in the exclusion of others, discounted, minimized, tone policed, or projected onto other minoritized individuals? How do we do that? In the selection of your PD guests, the folks that you bring, what is the process in which you do that? Oh, he's too radical, or she's too radical, or they're going to be too, controversial. Think about that. If you're trying to move the metrics and needles of work at your institution. Next slide, please. So I offer you these 3 I's: inquire, interrogate, and integrate. When you conduct a deep autopsy of your PD work, what is working, what is not working, what is status quo, what is going to move the needle, and that has to be done. Think, is your language inclusive? Do others see themselves in you? You may not understand their perspective, but their thinking, is that reflected in your advocacy? Are you empathizing with the work that they're recommending that your institution does? If so, how? If not, how can you be asking those vulnerable questions, and how you also bake it in on sprinkle it on? Next slide, please. Disrupt, dismantle, decolonize. Disrupt antiquated ways of thinking. Are you still moving the same usual business energy? We are in a new norm. There's no going back to normal. You can put that away. 2020 and things have changed. How are we adapting to this new norm? Have you identified inequities and the sources of those powers? And then are you actively engaged in decolonizing yourself? You know, the top picture is what we would consider police brutality, but that was British soldiers participating in state-sanctioned violence. On the bottom, that was the British, that was the Boston Tea Party, when they were literally dumping goods of the British Empire into the Boston port. They were looting, and they called it a party. And people protest, and they call it violent protests. They take a TV out of a Target, and it's completely different, right? But you can loot thousands of dollars of worth of and dump them in and engage in violence. It's not considered what others have engaged in. So look at the language and how we have to consistently decolonize ourselves. It's interesting. Literally, white folks can protest, and we call it a party, and it's in our curriculum, the Boston Tea Party, and other folks will protest, and it's called something else completely. And the coverage of it is completely different. So how then do we continuously decolonize ourselves and dismantle and disrupt these systems of thinking? And then the last piece here, the next slide, is assessing our positionality, power, and privilege. We all have some type of positionality at an institution. We all have some type of influence, relationships. We have some type of power, uppercase or lowercase, and we have some type of privilege. We are at the table sometimes, or we are in these spaces. How then do we kind of recommend, propose work that's going to move strategically the initiatives that's important? And so at the statewide level, we're here to give you the support and funding, local implementation. You're at the 20-yard line, you gotta score that touchdown. You know your institution the best. You know what levers you have to pull, right? And so we're here to support you. We're doing this out of justice, not out of emotion. And so hopefully we can enact change and understand each of us has some type of agency, and we have to activate that agency and enact that power. Next slide. That's it. We have time for questions and answers. Dr. Martinez, back to you.
Dr. Martinez, your mute is on.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Buul, and thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you to all of you for engaging with us in the chat. I know there were a few questions, so if anyone wants to unmute, I think we have just a couple of minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and do want to address some of the questions. So I don't know if anybody wants to unmute and pose their question if it hasn't been answered yet.
Luis, go ahead.
Luis, I said Luis, yeah.
Sorry, so the question that I have is in regard to the anti-racism framework. I know that many colleges are trying to promote it in their districts, and we're very embedded and want to do all of the work through that framework and that lens. But there are some members in our society that are using that word in a negative sense, and they basically are asking us to stop using it or stop doing that type of work because they have certain interpretations of it that we don't hold true, but they hold true, and therefore they want to stop that type of work. So what does the Chancellor's office offer in terms of either protection or recommendations when we're trying to do that work, and there's members in our society that are trying to prevent that work?
Thank you for that question, Luis. I think we face that. And I can tell you, even at the Chancellor's office, even the Chancellor, when he put out the call to action, he got a lot of emails. And we really had to make the decision whether we were all willing to put our jobs on the line, because that's really what he was doing and what all the rest of us were doing when we were calling and using the term anti-racist. But again, I think Dr. Buul put it that we're not in the same place. I think what has happened has called us to do this work unapologetically. So as far as protection, I can't say that we truly have protection. I think what we're doing right now and some of the strategies that we're using, because this is a lot of the work that you do, right? We provide guidance, but we can't offer protection. A lot of the work that you guys do is done at the local level. You have a board of trustees, right, that works with your presidents or your superintendents in some districts. So we are working directly with trustees. I am one of the liaisons that works with the trustees because they're also trying to educate. So a lot of this is about education and bringing as many people as possible along to do this work with us. But I truly understand that there are still some people that are never going to come along and do this work, come along. But I think we've had more people say, yes, we want to do this, we're committed, and we see the value in it because it truly is about justice, like Dr. Bull said, and that social justice that we want to see our students succeed. But it is changing and working with our boards. So that's some of the work that we're doing behind the scenes that you guys don't get to see. And we're actually presenting, I think I put that in the chat, we're presenting to them next week at their town hall. So we are on the road and trying to get as many people to join us to do this work. I know our chancellor is meeting with the CEOs this weekend, and he's presenting some of this to the CEOs as well. So we're working with everyone who wants to work with us, but even those who don't, we're trying to do a lot of education as well to bring them along and really commit to this work as well. So we know it's not easy. Anybody
While
else?
people are gathering their thoughts, and you're all welcome to type your questions in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself. Did I hear it right? The funding for DEI with an HR and EEO has already been distributed to the colleges. Is that correct, Dr. Bull?
Yes, the P1 enforcement did go out, and it's not a secret right now that they don't know what to do with the money. Some institutions, so please contact them and say, hey, we would like to offer some PD around this area. You know, we'd like to have this initiative funded. Again, around those pre-hiring, hiring, post-hiring strategies. So that has been deployed. The mini grants, the 5 million, will be hopefully deployed in a later moment, but that 15 million is out the door already. As well as the PD money as well, Dr. Martinez, correct?
Yes, also there is money that was sent out to districts to develop culturally competent PD for faculty. As well. So that money, the memo is going out next week. I'm just having it reviewed internally so that money can go out. But just to let you know, and I know some people have contacted me as well, and I let them know that this is to develop culturally competent PD for faculty. So that money is available as well. And there also is going to be money grants as well. So we will have grants that districts can apply for. If you guys want to develop something or you have ideas, that's going to go out probably in the next 2 months or so, because we still have to develop that process. There's some internal work we have to do before we put that out. So there is some time, but I'll make sure to share it. So we are going to start using the Vision Resource Center community. So if you haven't joined it or you have colleagues who haven't, we're going to start sharing a lot of our work there. So when this does come out, our memos, everything, we'll try to put them there for you as well so that you are aware of what's happening. So we'll make sure that there's more engagement there.
Excellent. And I think if you were here at 9 o'clock, you probably heard that our group for CSD, we advocate for all the practitioners, and we work directly with the Chancellor's office. In fact, Siria Martinez actually sits in some of our meetings. So when you stay connected with us on our website or through the newsletter, we will be providing you updates, as well as in October when we have our fall conference, you will be receiving updates. I saw that Shannon posted a question in the chat, one of our board members. I lost the question, but I think it was about setting up a work group. And if anyone's interested, we're definitely open. We're always looking for volunteers, and we want to keep the momentum going, keep getting things done. So reach out to Shannon Krajewski. Shannon, if you can throw your email in the chat, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I'll actually start a thread in the PD community about it, and then we'll start it there. That's a better space for it, I think.
Wonderful.
But yeah, I'll still put
great.
my thing in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I just want to mention that we'll likely get the letter out before June, because I know that everyone will want this exciting information, and we have a ton of newsletter subscribers now. So we'll work really hard to get that newsletter out to you before June, so you don't have to wait for all this awesome information.
Thank you so much, Rania. I loved what Dr. Abdul said at the very end, becoming a diversity, equity, and inclusion change agent. That is amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Bull. Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, for being here today. This concludes our morning session. We are going to go on a little break. So we will see you back here.